He didn't even look up when he said it. Effective next quarter, Megan will lead ops. You'll support her transition. That was Owen, CEO, founder, mentor, friend, or so I thought. I stood there with my notes still open from the quarterly routing review, a page full of optimization logs I'd built from scratch over 16 years. My thumb hovered above the next slide, the one titled Forecast Stability Under Load, but suddenly it felt pointless. The silence between us stretched. He finally looked up and added, like it was an afterthought, "You've always been good at training." There's a moment, half-second maybe, when the mind flicks through everything you've built, every hour you stayed late fixing broken handoffs, every contract you kept from falling apart because you caught a mismatch 2 hours before rollout. And in that moment I realized, this wasn't a promotion for her, it was a burial for me. Hey, if you've made it this far into the story, do me a quick favor. Subscribe and like the video. 97% of people just listen and scroll. But your support really motivates the team to keep telling stories like this. Thanks. Now, back to the moment it all shifted. I didn't argue. I just closed my laptop and left the conference room without a word. I'd learned years ago, public emotion gets remembered and not in your favor. Let them think you're stunned. Let them think you're passive. Let them think what they want. Later that day, Megan knocked on my office door. She wore a fitted blazer, perfectly curated makeup, and that glow you get when someone hands you a throne you didn't earn. "I'd love to learn from you," she said with a smile, clutching a notebook like it made her credible. I nodded. Sure, let's walk through some system basics. But I didn't open the live routing matrix. I didn't hand her access to the SLA vault. I didn't show her the recovery logic I'd hard-coded into the vendor synchronization loops. I showed her the dashboard. Glossy, superficial, harmless. Over the next few days, she shadowed me in meetings, misinterpreted metrics, pitched half-baked changes to supplier tiers that would have crippled our intermodal flow, and smiled the whole time like she was winning. Owen, meanwhile, watched from the sidelines like a proud father at a middle school recital, blind to the fact his star pupil didn't know the difference between latency lag and vendor bounce. But I wasn't angry. Not really. Because while Megan played CEO in training and Owen rearranged the furniture, I reviewed one particular document, my amended executive agreement, buried in the Series C archive. Clause 6.3e. I'd written the suggestion myself, back when the board asked for risk mitigation frameworks for core system custodians. I was listed. Quietly, precisely, permanently. Any shift in title or authority without written consent, immediate severance and full equity acceleration at current market valuation. And with Keller Tech sitting on a $480 million logistics engine, my slice wasn't small. I just had to let them hang themselves, politely, professionally, and in writing. They wanted a queen to replace me? Fine. But they forgot who built the castle. He waited until after lunch, same day I'd led a 3-hour root cause audit for our West Coast carrier delay. I'd barely sat down when he tapped on the glass wall of my office and said, "Got a minute?" It was the kind of voice people use before offering you something you didn't ask for, like a father inviting you to chat about your life while already having decided what your life should be. We went to the little side room next to the old finance archive. No screens, just a chair, a whiteboard, and Owen pacing like he was about to break news I'd be grateful for. "Keller Tech's scaling," he said. "New regions, new investor eyes. We need fresh leadership in ops. Megan's ready. She's been learning from the best." He gestured toward me like that was supposed to land as a compliment. "And we think this is the time to make that official. You'll stay on, of course, support her, ease the transition." I folded my hands. "You're asking me to report to her?" He paused, but only for a breath. "It's a shift, yeah, but titles aside, this is about vision, not hierarchy." There it was. I kept my face still, my voice neutral. "If that's the move, legal should review the transition terms. My agreement has stipulations around role changes." He chuckled. "Legal? No need for all that. HR already prepped the announcement. We're finalizing comp alignment this week. Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be." I almost smiled, not because I was amused, but because I knew exactly what clause he had just stepped on with both feet. Clause 6.3e, tucked neatly into the appendix of my executive agreement. Drafted, reviewed and amended during the Series C diligence phase when the board realized the risk of losing any core systems custodians. It had taken 3 calls with legal and a one-on-one with the Series C lead investor to get the language clean, but it was there, signed. Active. Any downward adjustment to my title or functional authority without my explicit written consent triggered immediate severance and accelerated equity vesting, based on the most recent internal valuation. And Kellertech's internal valuation post Q4, just shy of $500 million. He never read it. I had. So I nodded like the loyal soldier they thought I was. I'll review the announcement draft, I said. Make sure it's aligned. Great. Owen said, relieved, as if compliance meant agreement. We'll do this smoothly. No disruption. I stood, shook his hand, and left the room without saying another word. What he didn't realize was that the disruption had already started, not with a protest, not with an outburst, but with silence and a clause. I got there before sunrise. That wasn't unusual. I'd done it for years, but that morning I was deliberate about it. Clean shirt, neutral jacket, hair pulled back. No jewelry except my watch. My inbox was empty because I'd already archived everything that mattered. My access badge still worked. Every system still recognized me as primary authority. Nothing had changed yet, which was exactly the point. I walked the floor once. The hum of the servers, the low rhythm of early freight handoffs, the quiet certainty of systems behaving because I designed them to. 16 years distilled into muscle memory. I didn't rush it. At 8:17, Megan arrived like a burst of energy that didn't belong in the room. Bright smile, coffee she hadn't paid for, a tablet under her arm like a prop. She waved at me as if this were day 1 of a mentorship she'd earned. At 8:19, Owen followed her in, already smiling, already relaxed. He looked relieved, like the hard part was over, like I'd folded exactly the way he expected. Morning, he said, lifting his cup. Ready to train her? I didn't answer right away. I walked to the table at the center of the conference space, the same table where I'd negotiated vendor rescues at 2 a.m., where I'd mapped contingency flows during port strikes, where I'd saved this company more times than anyone could count without ever being thanked for it. I placed a single envelope on the table and slid it toward him. Actually, I said evenly, I'm here to resign, effective immediately. The room didn't react the way movies pretend it does. There was no gasp, no shouting, just a sharp, uncomfortable stillness. Owen's smile froze halfway through another sip of coffee. Megan blinked. Once, twice, like she thought she'd misheard. You're... what? Owen said. I didn't repeat myself. I reached into my bag and set my ID badge on the table. Then the company laptop. Then a signed copy of the severance notice, clipped neatly, already dated. Owen opened the envelope. Skimmed the first page like it was an inconvenience. Then his brow tightened. He went back to the top, read slower, turned the page. His coffee sat untouched, cooling in his hand. Megan leaned forward, whispering, Is this a joke? I didn't look at her, because it wasn't a performance. It wasn't a bluff. It was a switch being thrown. Owen's eyes finally lifted to mine. Not angry yet, not panicked. Just confused, the way people get when the ground moves and they don't know why. You can't just walk out, he said. We had a plan. I know, I replied. You made it very clear. I stood before either of them could say anything else. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I didn't threaten. Everything that needed to be said was already in writing, already binding, already irreversible. I turned and walked out. Behind me, no one followed. No one stopped me, because they were still trying to understand what had just happened, and by the time they did, it would be far too late. The badge scanner chirped as I exited. The doors opened, the systems kept running, for now. By 12:03 p.m., the silence broke. First as a ping from legal, then a string of frantic calendar holds. Owen tried to reschedule a finance sync, but it was too late. My resignation letter had already landed in 3 inboxes that mattered: General Counsel, Head of Risk, and the Series C Board Observer. Clause 6.3e wasn't theoretical, wasn't vague. It had been inserted deliberately during the third round of funding when KellerTech's investors raised concerns about operational continuity. At the time, I had been labeled a core system custodian. That was the term they used, legalese to describe the people who, if removed improperly, could take the entire logistics pipeline down with them. The clause protected us, quietly. It stated that if any custodian was demoted, reassigned, or had their authority diminished without written consent, severance would trigger at the highest valuation recorded in the trailing 6 quarters. Equity would vest immediately, and if not paid out within the stipulated window, penalty interest would apply. My number? $14.7 million. Owen called it impossible, said it had to be a misread. No one gets that for walking out, he told the GC. Legal didn't laugh. They found the clause, found the amendment, found the signature, his signature, digital and time-stamped, buried in a 438-page bundle that had been signed during the height of the Series C pressure cooker, when speed mattered more than scrutiny. It wasn't a bluff. It was enforceable. And within 30 minutes of legal confirming it, the dominoes began to fall. The first investor called in. A partner from Caro Ridge Capital, the same firm that had anchored our $96 raise 2 years prior. She wasn't confused. She was livid, because no one had disclosed a triggered custodian clause, and now she had to explain a 7-figure outflow to her own partners. By 1:15, an emergency board session had been scheduled, not for the following week, not even the next day. Same day. 5:00 p.m., no agenda, just 2 words in the invite. Reeve resignation. I wasn't in the room, of course, but I imagined the silence sounded familiar, like the kind that follows a system alert you don't understand until someone reads the fine print. Owen had made a move, thought it was smart, strategic, sleek, but he'd stepped into a minefield he never saw coming. And now every step KellerTech took echoed with the ticking of a clause written not in spite, but in preparation for exactly this moment. By mid-morning the next day, Owen's tone had shifted from confident to cautious. He'd stopped using the word unrealistic. Now it was open to interpretation. He called finance and asked them to run a fresh scenario. His words, not legals, hoping they could massage the numbers into something that looked more like a rounding error and less like a structural breach. But Clause 6.3e wasn't written with ambiguity in mind. It didn't just account for base salary. It pulled compensation from a layered formula, adjusted bonus trajectory, long-term retention stock, system licensing valuation, and operational structure, penalties tied to custodian removal. And tucked neatly in the final line, a 3% default interest rate if funds weren't remitted within 7 business days. Finance returned the number later that afternoon, higher than before, $15.1 million all in, and that didn't include legal costs, opportunity loss, or brand risk. But the real blow didn't come from spreadsheets. It came from clients. The first email hit the ops inbox at 11:47 a.m. Subject line, Concern, Protocol Lead Departure? One of our European distribution partners had flagged a sudden drop in system responsiveness and was requesting clarity, specifically citing the WR compliance protocols embedded in their SLA. That was me. WR, William Reeve. And those protocols? Customized sequencing logic I designed 3 years ago after a port freeze nearly tanked their seasonal contract. The second email came 28 minutes later. A U.S. rail logistics client, one of our top 5, paused their $9.2 million renewal negotiation. They wanted confirmation that the architect of their real-time reroute dashboard was still with KellerTech, and when they didn't get it, they stalled, formally. Legal flagged both messages, so did client services. But it was the investors who panicked first, because client confidence was baked into KellerTech's Q2 projections. And without that $9.2 million renewal, everything from the hiring pipeline to the next infrastructure tranche would need to be recalibrated. Owen called a second board session for Friday. He told them it was just to walk through reputational impact, but I knew what it really was, an audit, not of me, of him. Because they were finally realizing this wasn't about one person resigning. It was about what happens when you remove the one person holding the blueprint and assume the building won't feel it. Day 2, the cracks started to show. Not in my world. I was fine. Mornings were quiet now. I'd already begun onboarding with a firm in Rotterdam, and my phone stayed silent except for the occasional legal update. But inside Kellertech, the walls were shifting. Megan tried to lead her first regional partner call that afternoon. I heard about it from someone still in the ops loop, a whisper over Signal. She fumbled through the logistics cascade report, couldn't explain the 4-hour discrepancy in fleet timing across the East Coast corridor, and when asked about the override sequence for delayed customs clearance, she said, "I think that was part of the old system." The partner flagged it, not just internally, but in writing, because Clause 6.3e didn't just outline compensation, it had teeth. 14 business days from my resignation to settle the severance. Clean, full, final. Or Kellertech forfeited its licensing rights to 3 of the routing engines I'd built before their Series B. Systems that weren't fully transitioned into corporate IP. Systems that still operated under my name. Systems they'd kept using. The countdown had started the moment I handed over that envelope. Day 5, their legal counsel reached out to mine. The email wasn't aggressive. It wasn't even defensive. Just one line, requesting discussion around equitable interpretation of Clause 6.3e and surrounding provisions. Translation, they wanted to negotiate, they were already behind. Because legal clarity wasn't the issue, enforcement was. And the clause had already been reviewed, confirmed, and time-stamped. Each day they waited, interest compounded. Each hour they delayed, trust eroded from partners, from clients, from within. Day 6, a board member messaged me directly. No subject line, just, "Is this fixable?" I read it 3 times, considered answering, thought about how many times I'd raised concerns that went ignored, how often I'd been asked to just smooth it over, how frequently I'd been the firewall for executive decisions made without understanding the tech beneath them. And then I closed the message, didn't reply. My attorney did. Calm, precise, no bluster. Just the clause, the total, the deadline, and the clock. Because I wasn't holding a grudge, I was holding a timer, and they were already halfway through it. Rotterdam didn't ask for references. They didn't need to. NetBridge Systems had followed my work for years. Quietly, like the smart ones do. Their CTO, a lean, sharp systems architect named Eileen, had read one of my early white papers back when I published under initials only. She'd quoted me during her last keynote, apparently. I didn't know that until she told me in person. They flew me in on a Friday. By Monday morning, I had an office with glass walls, full access, and a title that didn't need explanation, VP of Infrastructure Autonomy. But the real offer wasn't on paper, it was in the structure. A founding licensee seat on their partner platform, full architectural veto power, no PR spotlight, no press release, just respect, responsibility, and terms I drafted myself. The first client to sign a cross-border integration under my name, one of Kellertech's top logistics clients. They didn't hesitate, didn't ask about paperwork, just said, "We want the person who designed the original sync protocol. If that's you, we're in." They were in. Owen called 2 days later. I let it ring. Then came the email. Subject line, "Checking in." Just 3 sentences. Vague, almost friendly, like we were colleagues catching up, like the past 2 weeks hadn't happened. I didn't respond. My attorney did. Please direct further communication through legal channels. No emotion, no escalation, just a line in the sand, and a reminder that whatever channel he thought we were still on had been rerouted permanently, because I hadn't disappeared. I'd leveled up, and the platform I was helping build now? It didn't need Kellertech, but it would replace what they thought was irreplaceable. One client, one system, one signature at a time. The boardroom was quiet, too quiet for a company that liked to posture growth and velocity. No flashy dashboards, no optimism. Just legal standing at the front of the room with a remote in one hand and a storm in the other. Slide. 1. Trigger Clause 6.3e. The room shifted. Some glanced down at printed packets. Others stared forward like they hadn't seen that clause before, because most of them hadn't. It had been buried, obscured by investor optimism and the assumption that no one in my role ever leaves. Not like this. Slide 2. Accelerated compensation 1420.7. You could hear the air change. One board member whispered something to his associate. Two others exchanged glances. Someone coughed. Slide 3, client risk 2, key contracts pause. That got their attention. Because numbers are negotiable, but trust isn't. And those clients hadn't just paused. They'd done it publicly, with formal letters citing concern over infrastructure custodial continuity. Owen, predictably, tried to retake control. He didn't raise any objections, he said. No pushback. He just left. But the compliance officer, Sarah, sharp, unsparing, didn't let it sit. Because he didn't need to argue, she said. He wrote the rulebook, he put the clause in, and you triggered it without reading it. Owen opened his mouth to reply, but someone from Risk interrupted. A new update had just come in. NetBridge Systems, my new home, had finalized the acquisition of Ferropath Logistics. Mid-tier player, modest revenue. But Keller Tech had been eyeing them for a back-end integration project for 9 months. Half the internal planning docs were still sitting in their CRM. And now, NetBridge owned them. I hadn't orchestrated it. But when Eileen, NetBridge's CTO, asked me to oversee due diligence, I didn't say no. I already knew where the red flags were buried because I'd written half of the analysis Keller Tech had used to court Ferropath in the first place. The board didn't speak for a full 10 seconds after the update. No one had to, because this wasn't a one-time cost anymore. It wasn't just about $14.7 million. It was about brand erosion, strategic loss, reputation punctured by one act of arrogance dressed up as a leadership transition. They thought they could remove the backbone and install a smile. Now they were watching their structure collapse, one contract, one clause, one misread at a time. NetBridge never issued a press release. There was no splashy LinkedIn post, no curated welcome to the team graphic. Just a quiet update to their leadership page tucked beneath the partner portal. William Reeve, VP Infrastructure Autonomy. No photo, no biography, just the name. That was enough. Inside Keller Tech, the aftershocks kept coming, even if no one said it aloud. Owen was quietly reassigned. His new title, Founder Emeritus, was a graceful way of saying moved aside. No responsibilities, no authority. Just a ceremonial place card for investors who still wanted his name somewhere visible. Megan kept her title, but she no longer ran operations. They brought in a consultant from Boston to stabilize execution, which was corporate speak for cleaning up what she couldn't manage. Her emails were still signed SVP Global Ops, but internally, she'd become a name on CC lines, looped in, never leading. And me? I stayed out of view, didn't comment, didn't post, didn't explain. I didn't need to. I had what I came for. Clean exit, full compensation. And a new seat at a table where my work wasn't just respected, it was foundational. Sometimes when I travel, I pass through one of the high-speed terminals I helped redesign. The routing flow still follows the latency ladder protocol I coded 8 years ago. The cargo loads still obey the stagger sync timing I buried in the system's heartbeat. The logos on the trucks are new. The dashboards have different skins. But underneath, it's still my work moving the freight. They don't say my name anymore. They just pay someone else now.